Hey class, welcome to lecture 4 for our church history class. This lecture primarily concerns itself with the period of the Reformation in Europe. This is an absolutely massive topic that we're not going to be able to get to in a whole lot of detail in this lecture, but hopefully our readings and your paper for this week will help highlight this a little bit closer for you and help you understand the times. So with this lecture, I'm just going to kind of give you a really quick flyover of what the Reformation period looks like, and hopefully it'll give you a context for which one you're reading. So, why the Reformation? There are about a million reasons for this. The most obvious and clear, and the one that requires the least amount of explanation, is that the church had kind of fallen into a time that was in need of theological reformation as well as moral reformation. There's also a lot of counter arguments that say, like there were very vibrant church communities during this time within the Catholic Church, and that's totally fine. But there also were some very morally laxed and theologically laxed areas of the church that needed reformation. Hopefully you'll fill that question out a little bit thicker with your reading. So let's begin with Luther. Martin Luther is kind of credited with the kickoff of the Reformation in that he nails this thing called the 95 Theses onto a church door, which you'll actually read this week and maybe write a paper on if you so desire. And he outlines some of the theological and moral laxities that he's seen. It's important to remember that at this point in Luther's life, he didn't want to break with the church and cause a new one. He wanted to fix what was wrong. And he actually thought that the Pope would be on his side, which he'll find out later he wasn't. That's about all for Luther that we can talk about right now, but the book will help you fill him in more. He's a really interesting character. Zwingli in Zurich, Switzerland, contemporary to Martin Luther, Ulrich Zwingli. He comes to the same kind of conclusions as Martin Luther, but he says that he did it on his own with his own study. A key difference between Luther and Zwingli is the importance that they place upon reason and logic. Martin Luther is not interested in reason and logic as Zwingli is. Zwingli is also a patriot. He's willing to fight for his city-state of Zurich, and he will die in a battle outside of his city fighting Catholic forces. The Reformation isn't a period where you're just writing treaties. It's real life. People are dying for what they believe. The Anabaptists, we'll talk about them briefly. They come out of a lot of different places, but they get their beginning in Zurich as well with Zwingli. They are a very interesting group of individuals that you'll read about. The main reason that they break away from Zwingli and Zurich is the issue of adult baptism, which you'll get into more in the books. But effectively, the reason why Zwingli and the church government or city government of Zurich doesn't like the Anabaptists is because, as we've talked about in previous lectures, there's a relationship between the church and the state here. And they've become so intermingled by this time that they're almost inseparable. So, in Zurich during this time, if you were to baptize your baby, it would not only mean that the baby's a Christian, of course, but it would also mean that they are loyal to the state of Zurich. So when Anabaptists come around and say, no, we think that it's not right for infant baptism, individuals should be able to make that choice on their own and be baptized when they're an adult, That's effectively saying we don't buy into your system. We don't buy into Christians being Christians as babies, and we most importantly don't buy into fealty to your city state, which is really dangerous during this time, to not have a whole group of people that say, well, we don't swear loyalty to you. And as I already said, Zwingli's going to die in a battle with the Catholics. They need to know who they can trust and who they can't trust. This is really important stuff. So they're not just fighting about like theological minute points. This is real important everyday stuff on who you can trust and who you can't trust. Lastly, let's talk about Calvin. Calvin is a second generation reformer. He comes 30, 40 years after Zwingli and after Luther. And so he has the benefit of being able to read what these guys have already said and to build up upon it. He doesn't have the same problems and the same set of conditions that Zwingli and Luther had. And so because of that, he's able to create a much more succinct and comprehensive Reformation thought that Luther and Zwingli and the Anabaptists weren't able to do. So that's kind of a brief flyover for everything. So once again, we've covered why the Reformation occurred. We gave one reason, that there was moral and theological breaks. Protestants will say the Reformation needed to happen because there were theological breaks. Catholics, on the other hand, will say the Reformation needed to happen because there were moral breaks. We briefly introduced you to Martin Luther and what he did with the 95 Theses. We talked about Zwingli in Zurich and his patriotism and similar thought to Luther. We also talked about Anabaptism and why they gave one or two reasons why they were so hated in the Reformation Europe, and then made some comments about Calvin and why he's able to write so much more comprehensively than some of these early guys. So I know that's a lot. It's a huge amount of time, and there's a million other names that I could have mentioned, but we just can't do it all in this time period. If you have questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, good luck with your paper, and I look forward to reading it. Thanks. Bye.